By the time I was at the edge of the cliff, the most horrific thoughts that people could say to someone, I was saying to myself. Nobody loves you, nobody cares, and your life, you're a piece of shit. Like, all you do is cause more problems for people. You are such a burden. You're too much for anyone to handle. Like, you'll never be loved. Why are you here? Just like this storm of like, you're worthless, like nothing, like you've been here for how long and haven't done anything, just all those like thoughts, right? And I don't know why my consciousness brought forth, but the thought, stop, this is not real. And I was able to like take a breath, and I was like, heard it again, stop, this is not real. And all of a sudden, it's like I saw my mind outside of myself. I became the full observer of my mind rather than the believer of the thought. And when I had that like aha moment, I was able to take a step back. And I just kept like stepping back. And finally I was like in, fetal position, rocking, like you see in movies that portray people in psych wards, is like they're holding themselves and they're rocking. And I was doing that. And what I didn't realize was that every time I was rocking, the rock in the cliff was like cutting my back up and down like a knife. And I didn't even feel it because I was in so much emotional pain. I didn't even feel the physical pain. I didn't even know that was happening until I got to a safe space in a hotel room the next day and was like about to take a bath and saw like the gashes on my back of how.
Do you remember me? I am the part of you that is wise and alive, that is pure love and beyond your limiting mind. I am the you that is inspired, the you that is creative, the you that has true power. Are you ready to remember you?
Hello, and welcome to Remembering You, the show. I am your host, Ellie La Liberté, and I am a published author of 2 spiritual books. And this show is associated with my new book, Letters from You to You, Awaken Your Power Through Conversations with Your Higher Self. This show is about reconnecting to your power, the truth of who you really are. The guests on this show are authentic human beings who have stories to share with us about how they navigated through difficult challenges and illnesses, and also how they uncovered the higher part of themselves. May you feel inspired to go into your own healing journey and remember who you really are. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Remembering You, the show. I am your host, Ellie La Liberté, and today we have a very interesting guest with us, and very inspiring story. Her name is Stephanie Michelle Aycock, and I'm going to do a bracket with this because I've just been attracting Michelles all over the place. I first want to say hi. Thank you for being on the show, and I want to tell you something that you don't know, Stephanie. And I'm sorry, I forgot to say that Stephanie was from Houston, Texas. I was just caught up so much into my, oh my God, there's another Michelle in my life. It's insane. But I'm going to greet you first and say hi and welcome to the show.
Hello.
I'm very happy that you're here with me today because it's going to be a really cool conversation. Well, a very interesting conversation. Very important conversation. Before we dive into that, I want to just put some light at the beginning where I have just been, I don't know why, but I've been attracting so many Michelles in my life lately. And the thing is, my name is Ellie, but my real name is Michelle. So yeah. And there's a really backstory to that. And the reason why I changed my name is, anyways, it's long and it's for another complete podcast, but I didn't change it completely. It's just a nickname that I got just to kind of like identify myself with a newer energy because my name felt like it was heavy from my childhood and it just made me
Mm,
stick to an energy that I wanted to stick to by giving myself a new name that would mean something powerful. But lately I just been attracting so many Michelles and I'm like, wow, it's kind of like the universe is telling me like, hey, you're kind of like really embracing your little girl lately a lot more. And because Michelle keeps on coming back, I don't know if that's the reason, but it's so cool. And I guess I used to be a little bit more triggered in the past when I would hear
mm,
that name because of that. And now I'm like, huh, very interesting. So the little bracket there that I wanted to share with you. So I feel like we're connected in that way as well. And it's
yeah.
really nice to have you. So yes, today on the show, we're going to be having a really important conversation on suicide because this month, the September month, is Suicide Prevention Month. So it's a really, really important month. And we're going to be touching on addiction and depression as well. And Stephanie here is going to be able to go into her story and just explain what has happened, in her life and everything. So yeah, let's start from the beginning, Stephanie, and let's talk about also the project that you're going to be doing with all of this, which is
Yes.
amazing. Uh,
Yes.
but first, like, yeah, I want to have this conversation. It's going to be probably a very triggering conversation for a lot of people. I think it's sensitive for some people, but I think, yeah, there could be a really beautiful um, demystifying
Hmm.
suicide, right?
Yes. I'm going to jump on the name thing real quick because that's actually really important. I am going by my full name, Stephanie Michelle. Whereas before, when I was younger, I went by Stevie.
Oh,
And it was kind of like the same situation of like it no longer resonated with me. And I wanted to step fully back into who I am here to be.
wow.
And Stephanie means crowned one. And then Michelle is like, who is like God, question mark? Like who is like divine? I don't know. Um, yeah, so I grew up in an alcoholic home. And that means growing up with a lot of trauma and not feeling safe just in the environment that I was living in. And also with two parents who did the best they could, but also didn't have self love. So I never got to really experience what true love, in a sense, is because the self wasn't available to my parents. And I feel like that's a gift that people are getting to receive now, but our generation, there's so many people who had just parents who just didn't realize their value or their worth. And I think that's the stem of suicidal ideology, is like just not knowing your true value and your true worth. And so I grew up in an alcoholic family, and by the time I was 14, I think it was, I wrote a poem and shared it in school, and it sent all the alarm bells off with administration and the counselor and the teachers, because it was basically saying like, I don't feel like I belong here, period.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because for me, I took it as I was just expressing myself. But for the school, it was like a really big project that they all of a sudden kind of got to handle, because I did win a poetry contest. I did read it in front of the entire school. And then afterwards, everyone came and like started the process of a whole bunch of medication, a whole bunch of therapy sessions, which is great. And I now see that there's probably other ways that could have been handled.
Mhm.
Um, so from the time I was 14 to 24, I was on a cocktail of pills. This is back in the mid 90s. So we didn't really have a lot of information at the time. It was like that Prozac Nation time. And when I say cocktail of pills, I mean I was on like 5 or 6 different kinds of medication at one time. And by the time I think it was 15, I was institutionalized for depression and suicidal ideology. I never at that time got to the point where I wanted to like fully act out, but the thoughts were getting all too consuming for me to be able to even get out of bed.
Mm.
And then 6 months later, my dad passed away by suicide. And he was the alcoholic in the family, and his disease just took him. So for the rest of that time, I was pretty much kind of in a zombie mode. I wasn't feeling really anything, because the death of my dad was so intense for me. Um, and I didn't do the traditional thing where I went to a college. I went to a college for, I think, a semester, and no one really knows this, but I was doing great academically, but mentally and emotionally, I was a hot mess. Like I was on the phone with the suicide hotline. I was getting on and off my med by myself. It was a really dangerous situation. So I ended up leaving after the first semester. And then I was asking myself what to do. What do I want to be when I grow up? And it was an actress. I've always wanted to be an actress, always a performer. So I spent the next, I would say, almost 10 years in New York, really actually going after that dream. And what's amazing about that is that the gift that the conservatory gave me of being in an acting conservatory was that I was actually doing somatic practices and not realizing it. And a lot of people don't know that somatic practices is your body keeps the score. Your body knows all the trauma you've been through. Your body knows everything. And so I was actually doing something really interesting before it was the thing to do, which is voice work, movement, dropping into the body, really getting to learn how to release emotion. And I had 2 years of really intense training. But what it really was for me was processing my dad's death in a way that I never, now looking back, realized how much of a gift that was. I was getting to rage. I was getting to cry. I was getting to like fully feel all the emotions that came with my dad passing away by suicide. Mm-hmm. And at this time, I was still on my medication. And I went to Bali for an acting training program. And it was there that I heard this like really deep wisdom, like the voice, of God, of the universe, of spirit, just say like, you don't need to be on these anymore. Mm. And it was scary. And I actually am hesitant to talk about my whole like mental health journey, because it is a little controversial, with the sense that I was on meds for a decade and I've been off of meds for over a decade now. And it's not to say they were right, wrong, good, bad. It's just to say like my journey was going on them, having a bunch of stuff happen and disrupt a lot of my just natural ways of experiencing life, and then getting off of them and having a completely different experience. So I went to Bali, and when I was in a really intense training, I just had this hit of like, I don't need to be on these anymore. Mm-hmm. Mind you, at the time I had practices of how to be present, because that's what all acting is just learning how to be present and with really intense sensations. Mm-hmm. I had also just recently had been introduced to a chanting practice, where it's a practice of observing the mind. When you're chanting, you're observing the mind. And so I began to realize how my mind was working, and I trusted myself to get off my medication. And the doctor was against it, but then he finally got on board, and we did it the right way. For 7 months, I weaned off of these medications, and it was not fun. It was very challenging. And then for the next, I would say, 7 years, I was having to relearn how to live with life on life's terms. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the way I look at it is kind of like when they talk about an addict getting stunted when they start using. I feel like that's kind of what happened to me unintentionally. Exactly. Unintentionally, because my meds were never the right dose. They were never like, they could never get that chemical balance just right. And I know for some people they can, and that's amazing. That's why I'm saying I'm not saying yes or no to the medication. I'm just saying, for me, this is my journey. But I realized that I was going to have to do some really intense work So I was in therapy twice a week. I was, in all of these things, but I was still sick. Like I hadn't really dealt with the root cause because I hadn't had my mental breakdown slash spiritual awakening yet. So just because I was institutionalized when I was 15 and I didn't attempt at that time, that doesn't mean there wasn't the final time that I did.
Yeah.
And that came when I was 28, I believe. So, no, 27. And what happened was I lost myself in a person and my whole world became somebody like for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that toxic codependent relationship really took hold.
Yeah.
And my validation, my life support was this person. And it's challenging to say I was in love with them because for me, it was obsession.
Yes, absolutely.
It was a drug and it made my thoughts really, really wild. And so when I was at the brink, like at the end of my acting, I was so frustrated with acting. Acting was such a like I didn't have the confidence at the time to put myself out there in the way that I truly desired because my thoughts were so negative. And so I just gave up and I followed this person across the world. And we lived in like the jungle and just, you know, it was a very interesting situation. But what ended up happening was it got super incredibly toxic because it was like a pressure cooker. And by the end of our stay together in this paradise, I ended up on the edge of a cliff and contemplating really taking my life. And what happened in that moment was I don't know if you've seen the film Divergent.
Yes.
But there's a movie Divergent where she's in this like fear simulator. And every single time she's doing something, she's like, oh my gosh, this isn't real. And then it changes into a different fear.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh my gosh, this isn't real. And it changes into a different fear. And then she beats ultimately like the game, the fear simulator. And for whatever reason, my consciousness brought up that phrase when I was on the edge of the cliff about to jump. I had already gone a little bat poo poo, like I'd already lost my mind a little bit. And like, I'm not going to get into the details of what that looked like because that was pretty terrifying as well. But by the time I was at the edge of the cliff, the most horrific thoughts that people could say to someone, I was saying to myself, nobody loves you, nobody cares, and your life, you're a piece of shit. Like all you do is cause more problems for people. You are such a burden. You're too much for anyone to handle. Like you'll never be loved. Why are you here? Just like this storm of like, you're worthless, like nothing, like you've been here for how long and haven't done anything, you know, just all those like thoughts, right? And I don't know why my consciousness brought forth, but the thought, stop, this is not real. Mm-hmm. And I was able to like take a breath. And I was like, heard it again, stop, this is not real. And all of a sudden, it's like I saw my mind outside of myself. I became the full observer of my mind rather than the believer of the thought. And when I had that like aha moment, I was able to take a step back. And I just kept like stepping back, stepping back, stepping back. And finally I was like in, you know, fetal position, rocking like you see in movies that portray people in psych wards, is like they're holding themselves and they're rocking. And I was doing that. And what I didn't realize was that every time I was rocking, the rock in the cliff was like cutting my back up and down like a knife. And I didn't even feel it because I was in so much emotional pain. I didn't even feel the physical pain. I didn't even know that was happening until I got to a safe space in a hotel room the next day and was like about to take a bath and saw like the gashes on my back of how intense I was just like trying to soothe myself, right, ultimately. And when I was on the edge of the cliff, the whole like, stop, this is not real, I saw my mind outside myself. I then heard, you are an artist. You are here to simply be of service. Your art will heal. That's all you have to do is be of service. And it was so crystal clear. It was like, Moses and the sea parting, and it's the burning bush moment, right? And so after that whole experience, because that was pretty traumatic, I could no longer obviously stay where I was because I was not well. And my mom was like, you have to come home. You have to move back to Oklahoma with me, and I'm going to take care of you. I was like, I will come there for 3 weeks, but I'm going back to New York because I'm going to be an actress because my art's meant to heal, you know? And that's not what happened. I went back home and got into recovery, like really, worked 12 steps, really dug deep in my recovery, because I realized I wasn't addicted to alcohol or drugs. My addiction is eating disorder, which I overcame that as well. Not at this time yet, but my addiction was people who are addicts. My addiction is saving people. My addiction is that I'm going to be the sober one, and I'm going to take care of all the people who are addicts, because I couldn't save my dad. So I just kept reacting that pattern, which is a hell pattern to be in. And so I stayed in Oklahoma for 4 years, I believe. And what's interesting is we move to the Paradise. I had already started on like cocktail napkins and receipt papers, this thing I didn't know what it was. Now it's a award nominated screenplay, but at the time I didn't know what it was. And it was me wrestling with that question. And I still feel like the whole film that I'm creating is going to wrestle with this question and get people to ask themselves, what is it inside of us that makes us want to take our life? Like, what is it? And so I just went on this whole journey, and I realized now my life needed that experience of me on the edge of the cliff to be able to tell that story, because I knew my dad's version, right? Like I knew it, my dad took his life. So something inside of him was so loud that he went that direction. And with me, it's like, well, why did I not do it? What's the difference? Why does someone do it versus someone not do it? And I was like, well, I saw my mind. I realized too, I wasn't the mind. I'm bigger, like, like God's voice, love, light, whatever you want to call it. It's like, that's the voice I heard. And my dad didn't get that. And it's one of those things that my project, it's loosely based off my life. It's not 100%, but it's loosely based off my life. And it explores that conversation of who is the mind. And I've created this character that I actually use as a tool in my daily life. I named it. I call it out. It's called in my life, it's called Razum. And I'm able to see when it talks negatively. I'm able to see like it not as me, and therefore make different choices. And so my whole goal with this project, which is the film, is to create such a cinematic masterpiece that is such an enjoyable experience, because there's comedy in it, even though it is a heavy topic. Because I think my acting teacher, Anthony Abeson, said that you can't give people the medicine unless their mouth's opening and they're laughing. So it's like, give them the medicine when their mouth's open and laughing. And it's really a challenging topic to talk about. Like, people don't want to talk about suicide. People don't want to touch it. People are like, oh, those thoughts are too scary. But it's like, actually, what if you told people that it's not uncommon for people to have those thoughts?
Really not uncommon.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what I want to have the conversation about with you. It's awesome. Is like, the goal of my film, which is not made yet, it's in pre-production, is to give people the tool to see their mind as this ridiculous character that they don't have to listen to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly. That's an incredible journey. And
Yeah.
the resilience that you have is just amazing. And I think that you've always had that resilience inside of you. And you just needed life to bring you to to your knees enough times and to a very specific time for you to really see your power in that moment because you were vulnerable and you were ready to surrender everything. You know, I I love all of this because we're very much mystifying. That's how we say it, right? Because I'm French sometimes I but
Yep.
yes, the mystifying suicide. Um, because the thing is that, and it's so funny that I think about this today, and this is exactly how my spiritual journey began. When I was 21, I had someone who committed suicide, and it was the first time that I kind of had an awakening of saying, like, is there something more out there? And to me, it was like, where is my friend going? I was mad at the world because I didn't know anything about something that was, higher than me. I was so caught up, in my little world of negativity and all of that. And I've never been taught anything about spirituality or self-growth, like you say. Like, unfortunately, our parents were not, didn't have these resources. So for me, it was about getting to know something bigger than me. And it was triggered by someone who committed suicide. And it had to be someone that was close enough to me so that I could understand that I had research to do. I had to open up my mind for the first time in my life when I was 21. And it brought me on an extreme journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
And, you touched upon something, and this is why I'm saying demystifying the entire thing is a lot of people think that, as soon as we're getting these thoughts, that we need to, and especially if we talk about it to someone who is not really self-aware, who's not in self-development, who has not, went into any kind of journey in that sense of self-discovery, they're going to be really threatened by us coming and talk to them about these maybe disturbing thoughts. And they're going to assume right away that we need to go see a doctor. We need to go and get help by a psychologist like right away. And that, yeah, we might have to be on meds to just shut
Yeah.
that off. And they feel like this is probably the only solution because they feel like these thoughts are so disturbing that it's kind of like, yeah, the end of the world. But what I've noticed, and especially because I've done so much work on myself, is that we identify ourselves with our thoughts, absolutely. Like if we are, in all the realm of unconsciousness and just in our default self and a programmed self, it's normal for us to identify with these thoughts. And then when you get to come to a place where, like you said, of being the observer and looking at the thoughts, you really understand at that point that, you're not your thoughts, and you're especially not the pattern. And that's kind of like the conversation I was having with you. And I was explaining to you my perspective on suicide and what I've understand from my own journey, because I didn't think that I was suicidal or that I could ever be suicidal in my life. I didn't think
Hmm.
that I had mental illness in my life until I realized that, yeah, it was mental illness. I didn't go see a psychologist. I didn't go see, you know, a doctor to get prescribed on anything. But I realized today that, wow, like you're talking about your toxic relationship. Like I went through that and it was insane. And I was insane, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
There's so many things that I was doing, and I'm looking at myself today, and I was like, wow, this
Yep.
this was not sanity. And I was really, really difficult on myself as well. Like you said, like things like saying like, oh, you're a burden and you're useless and whatever. And that comes with levels as well. I feel that the more that I would go into my darkness
Hmm.
through my, practices and everything with my resilience as well, the more deeper that you can feel those
Hmm.
familiar feelings, okay? Because they get louder and louder and
Yep.
louder.
Yep.
What is very interesting in all of this is that it's only the pattern that is wanting to die. This is how I see it. And I'd love for people to really just grasp this idea
Yeah.
And it can be extremely triggering, like I said earlier, for people to watch this conversation and not be like, well, offended because maybe they lost someone to suicide, or they were, a lot of the times
Yeah.
suicidal, and maybe they thought that, they didn't have help from other people. They couldn't talk to anyone.
Yeah.
Um, but especially if you can look at it this way, you can detach yourself from identifying with this and thinking that this is an absolute dying of your body. I
Right.
believe, like, in the moment that I'm going to take you as an example because as well I can relate. I was in a situation, I don't think I would have done it, like thinking about it today, but I had these thoughts. I had the thoughts.
Mm.
I was on a lake. Oh, there were a lot of people around me, but still, I was on a lake on a kayak, and I remember just thinking to myself, I could seriously just jump in this water right now and end my
Mm.
life right now. And
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would care. I don't
Yep.
think anybody will really remember me all that much because I'm not doing anything right.
Yeah.
I had all of these thoughts. But as in that moment, it was like that, but I could remember, like, okay, where does these thoughts come from and why am I having those thoughts at that moment? And what I realized today is every time that we're having these thoughts, and especially when you're very vulnerable in a moment that you believe the thoughts,
Right.
you think it's going to happen, detaching from these thoughts and seeing them as, I'm not the one who wants to die. It's
Mm-hmm.
the old energy that wants to die. It's a
Yep.
pattern that wants to die, that has
Yes.
been within me, that has been screaming at me to
Yes.
die. It's
Yes.
a pattern that is willing to die. And that confuses people because, again, we are so identified with our thoughts that we believe that these thoughts are us.
Yep.
But it's only your ego that is wanting to drag you down in the same patterns and keep you there, to have
Exactly.
those familiar feelings, to feel those familiar feelings if you've always felt, because that's what gives you that high. And again, it's another addiction. We're talking about addiction. We are addicted to our patterns as well. We're addicted to feeling these familiar feelings so much that we think that this is what is us having highs all the time and just keeping us alive. That's not
Yeah.
true.
It's not. And Jim Carrey says it best. He has a quote that I am obsessed with. He says, depression is called deep
Rest.
pression. It's like you need deep rest from this character that you've created that is not you. And the way I look at suicidal ideology, because mine hasn't gone away completely yet, like it's gotten so less, but that's because I'm living in alignment with my truth. And I believe that suicidal ideology is actually exactly what Carrie's like, it's a character addition, you not being your authentic self, asking, like, I can't play this character anymore. I can't continue to live this out of alignment with my truth anymore. And so when those thoughts do come up, I look at it as, where in my life am I out of alignment? Where in my life do I feel trapped and I'm making myself a victim that I can't change the circumstances? Where in my life am I being so inauthentic that it's this painful? And it's taken me a while to get to the point of freeing myself from those layers, but every single time those suicidal thoughts come up, it's like, where, okay, I've created this thing that wants to die. Like, it's not me, it's the version of myself, the personality, the ego that is just no longer serving,
Yeah.
is no longer working. And then also looking at it at the flip side is like, we do develop these personalities, these characters, these mechanisms to stay safe in the world.
Mhm.
So understanding, like, everything you've created up until this point as the person you are has kept you safe in some way, and recognizing that it takes time to feel safe again in your body and to be okay to be yourself. Like, it's so wild that our society is like not fully expressed in the sense of like, you're safe to be yourself, whatever that is, whatever that looks like. So we create the fact that we're not safe in our bodies, and then we create patterns and we are conditioned, and it just kind of is this domino effect. And for me, my deepest healing has come through learning to be in my body, has like coming back home to my body. Because if you're stuck in your head, and most of us live like head up, right? Most of us are like just like not even aware that we're breathing or our heart's beating. Because we're trapped in the prison of the mind. And I truly believe that my dad didn't make it because he was trapped in the prison of the mind and wasn't connected into his heart and his body. And I truly believe that I did make it because I had those acting exercises that got me shaking and releasing and doing some weird ass shit, because that's what actors do. And the somatic practices were a different context, but it was doing the same thing. And what's really fascinating to me is just that we make suicidal ideology bad. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like if we could take it out of a negative framework.
This episode is brought to you by Remembering You, the coaching program. As a published author of a spiritual self-help book, it was crucial for me to bring to my readers a program that would help them go deeper into their emotional healing and release childhood trauma. This program includes journaling therapy, soma breathwork, and hypnotherapy to help investigate, release, and reprogram. Go to lettersbyellie.com to learn more. And now, back to the show.
So it's very funny because we had to restart this at a certain point because of multiple technical issues that started, with just me, I think you weren't able to log in. And then at one point you went back to log in, you were okay, but then everything was lagging.
So
I wasn't able to log back in.
I know. I practice Nichiren Buddhism, and they call it Shanto Shima, which is like the opposing forces to the Buddha nature, to the divine, whatever, and then we have a joke because whenever you're about to share something that's like really going to help someone and really support someone in some way, that techno Shima is what we call it, is like everything that can go wrong tech-wise will go wrong. And it's just, I didn't even get upset because I could see from the bigger perspective like what was happening, of like, oh yeah, of course this is happening because we're about to like get people connected to their true selves rather than the conditioned mind.
It's insane. It's the resistance, right? And it's not bad resistance. It's just like, yeah, it's part of the energy, and very funny. Anyways, I wanted to do this bracket because that was part of our journey of
recording. And I think it's a really good point, because we could have said like, we're not going to do this, let's do it another day, whatever. But that's like what I've noticed with my project that I'm working on, my film, is that the quote I always go back to is, when obstacles arise, the wise will rejoice and the foolish will retreat. Because if the obstacle is coming, then that means you're about to do something that's super impactful and that's super important for your own life and for others' lives. So it's like that, like we talked about, that resistance. And the way I look at it is that if you're expanding, you're going up, but you're also going down at the same time. So it's like you're going to get that contrast. And so celebrate almost when those, like when the techno Shima, when all the tech things were happening, I was like, yes, this is going to be a super powerful interview.
Exactly. It's getting out of the comfort zone, right? It's when something is just like making you bringing this resistance. It's kind of like telling you, well, the ego is telling you like, oh my God, this is not working, so I should just stop doing it. But at the same time, it's like, no, this is just you, like you said, expanding, and it's normal, and you have to get out of your comfort zone and just go anyways, right? But anyways, very, very cool. That could be a podcast on its own, I think. There's just so many things that happen like that, like daily to me. Anyways, so yeah, let's I wanted to go back and just step back into what you were talking about when you were explaining how some people think sometimes that it's bad to have these um, disturbing thoughts or these suicidal thoughts, and it
Yeah.
shouldn't be like normal to have them and whatever. And so I feel like that just brings the how can I say, the stigma even bigger, in the sense where
Yeah.
someone can be even more self-conscious about it, and not wanting to open up to people
Right.
that love, and talk safely about it as well. So I would love for you to share a little bit
Yeah.
more on that through your own journey. And as well, the thing that related this to me as well was that when you were talking about, when you shared that poem, and I want to know as well, like when you wrote that poem, was it in your head that you were sharing that poem to get that attention of people? No, exactly right.
Not at all.
I just want to bring that forward so much, because I do believe that, sometimes we just want to express ourselves, but like other people, because they're not ready to receive what we're actually just wanting to express, they take it as, oh my God, this is a big thing. And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying that having suicidal thought is not a big thing. I don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
dismiss anything, but
Right.
like other people's reaction, because they're not well with who they are and they don't know how to deal with this, and so they make it maybe more of a big deal in their
Yeah.
mind. They're actually making it worse in a way, unconsciously, for the person who is wanting to just express themselves and just want to be listened, probably in that moment. Like, how did you feel at the age of 15 when this is actually the way that things were handled for you?
Yes. So that was I wrote the poem when I was in 8th grade. So I think that was actually like 13, maybe
Oh, okay.
13, 14. So 8th, 7th or 8th grade. So there was a lot of unrest at my house already. And I also was pretty ostracized at school as well, just unintentionally. I just felt like I was weird. Like I was just, the odd one out kind of. And I I honestly just wanted to win a contest. Like I honestly was just wanting to be a really good poet at the time. And what came out of me was my truth. And I I think instead of the way that I believe that I was experiencing the way they handled it was they needed something to fix and they needed a project. Whereas if they would have just been curious
Yeah.
and kind of asking more questions rather than like, let me fix you, let's get you to the psychiatrist ASAP.
Yeah.
Um, then there's something to look at there. I'm looking, I'm at like listening to your question because there's someone in my life right now who is very suicidal. And it is challenging for me even to
Mhm.
hold that space.
Yeah.
And um because it's painful if you're not capable of holding that space. That's why there are trained therapists. That's why there are,
Mhm.
coaches and transformational coaches who do
Yeah.
work with the body and stuff. Um, but I would say that the most amazing gift you can give someone is to truly hear them and see them and just be present. Just be present and, validate that experience because that's what they are having. Um, it's such an interesting conversation because I don't want to say so far out of it, but I've had several years of not having these major episodes anymore. Um, and when I do have those negative thoughts, I have a different way of interacting with them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I want to teach people is that there's a way to get curious rather than, oh my gosh, I'm going to hurt myself. it's
Yeah.
it's it's like if you are in that stage of, oh my gosh, I'm going to hurt myself, get help.
Yes.
for, and I have a system that I've been following that I created called mental. And if I do this acronym every single day, then I have a solid foundation, and I'll share it with you. M is meditate, make your bed. E is exercise, express yourself. N is nature, nutrition. T is togetherness, community. A is ask for help. And L is laughter. And the most important thing you can do is ask for help, because we're having a conversation about thoughts being just thoughts and, neutral and all of that. But that's after a lot of work.
Yes, excellent.
And it's the most important thing you can do is to ask for help. Find someone safe, ask for help, and then let yourself be guided in whichever journey you're going to go on, because I believe everyone's journey is going to be different. Like, my journey is not going to be the same as someone else's journey. Someone might need medication, someone might not. There's so many different ways to explore the mental health world. And for me, it's really almost making that character in my mind that is such an asshole hilarious and ridiculous, and hearing it that way and seeing it that way, so I can be like, oh my gosh, look at this, instead of like, you're right.
Yeah. Instead of taking it so seriously, which is something that we automatically do. We take all of our thoughts so seriously.
Yes.
All the time. So
yes. And that's why it's important to have a practice of observing your thoughts. Like for me, I chant and I meditate, and it's necessary. It's like going to the gym, because when I am in crisis moment, I've already built that muscle, and being like, oh, I can choose which one to hook onto and believe, and which one not to hook onto and believe. And so it's very important, I believe, to have some kind of meditation, prayer, I chant practice.
Yeah, for sure. And I loved your mental thing, and we're going to put that in the description as well, so that you can actually see the words that are aligned with the letters. So thank you. So I usually do something with my guests at the end or near the end of the show, but this time around I thought that we spoke about it before, because there is a letter in my book that is really well appropriate for this conversation, and you can absolutely go and dig deeper in this, what we're going to be speaking about. But and that is relating as well to the moment that you were on that cliff and you decided to soothe yourself. I have a letter in my book that's called Grieving You. So number 10. So this is the one that we chose for you today. And usually it's a guest that chooses it, but I decided we would do that together just to bring that up, because it is a very powerful letter.
Yes.
And it just really helps the reader to understand, like, that you're not actually the one who is wanting to die in the moment of an attempt. Your energy, the old energy, is wanting to die. And I think we touched on that a little bit early on. And in all of that, there is a part of you which is related to your inner child that you're wanting to go and soothe in that moment. And the way that I could see what was happening to you on that cliff is that actually it was your higher self that was taking care of you in that moment, that was taking care of the little girl and soothing the little girl. And this is why automatically you were in that state, and you were kind of, you were grieving that part of yourself in that moment. You were soothing that little girl that needs to rest, really. Our inner child needs to rest. We need to come to a point in our lives where we become the parent that we never probably had for certain things in our lives, if not for our entire childhood, depending on who you are and how you were parented. But that soothing part, like, I would love for you to share with me your perspective about that, on how there is a grieving process in all of this, right? So it's not because you didn't officially die, or it's not always about someone leaving this world that we're going to be grieving about that. There's actually a grieving process of every old energy in our lives, so and every old versions of ourselves that we need to be able to just accept that we need to let go of this energy, and it's okay to feel all of these feelings, right? And it's okay to go and just hug that little girl and say like, it, to feel all of it, because I do believe that in the spiritual community, a lot of the time there's kind of like this bypass where spiritual bypass that says like, oh, well, you have to get over your things really quickly because you can't stay in the victim mentality too long and blah, blah, blah. But that's pushing away also the patterns. It's
Yes.
not to stay in it, but it has to be seen. It
Mm-hmm.
has to be loved for it to be released, I believe. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I want to have your perspective on that moment that you were on the cliff, and
Oh,
how were
wow.
you seeing that?
So that moment when I like, this is not real, saw my thoughts as outside of myself and was like slowly stepping back, and finally got to this like little nook and just curled up into fetal position and started rocking back and forth while the rocks were slicing my back. I think that moment I was just in a space of, I was so, honestly, I was so far gone. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was not, I was being guided by something bigger than me,
Yeah,
but
I
I
feel
was kind of gone still at
yeah,
that point.
yeah.
I didn't really come to for a while. And um, the grieving for me wasn't in those immediate moments. The grieving for me has been more recently, actually,
Okay.
of truly seeing the life I thought I was going to have and grieving the idea of it,
Yeah.
as well as grieving the parts of me that cannot come along for the next version of myself.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone ever really talks about that, of like, hey, when you have an up level or when you heal certain aspects of yourself, things fall away that
Yeah.
no longer resonate with that. And my belief is that your outside is the reflection of your inside world. So as you love and heal and fall deeply in love with yourself, everything in your environment that is not resonating on a level of loving you starts to fall away, and it's painful, relationships, jobs, a whole bunch of things. Currently in a moment right now of massive upheaval of like, this old version of me is dying and this new version is emerging, and my whole environment is shifting, and
Yeah.
there's a grief around just trusting and letting go. I also think that grief is the biggest initiation into life, because I don't know how I could be this joyful and how I could really celebrate my life. I have a practice every morning of putting Tony Moss's song Grateful on and writing through the entire song. I write down everything I'm grateful for, and I'm crying at the end because I'm like, holy cow, there was a time I didn't even want to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And I I realized I was in that space of like, gratitude almost feels like grief. And it's like, it's the same coin of, to fully be alive, you have to accept you're going to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing that is so beautiful is that once that's fully accepted, then it's like you get to see life in a whole different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some other instances of touches with death, that were not my attempt, that were not suicidal. It was my body.
Mm.
And I had heart surgery at one point. And when I was recovering, I got back into my head and I was back on the edge of the cliff again with my thoughts. Like, they were all just a negative shitstorm ultimately.
Yeah.
And I literally was in like bedridden because I just had heart surgery. And I was like, I'm back on the cliff.
Mm.
What am I going to choose?
Yeah.
am I going to choose to be in this prison? And I believe that that was the moment that I finally chose to be fully here, to like really be here, to be like, I'm in it. There's no, like, my body's tried to check out. I've tried to check out. Like, I'm here for a reason. I am here for a reason, and I have a purpose and I have a mission. And that's why I'm alive. And once I fully embodied just like being alive, my whole world changed.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And extremely powerful. And extremely inspiring for those who want to be there and want to experiment this. And you know, there's another grieving process as well, I feel, within all of this, is that when you choose to take that journey of going within yourself and really going into the darkest places, there's a level of grieving as well there, because you know that it's going to be difficult and you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. And so your reality is going to shift really quickly. And it's going to shift in different levels. Yes. And then your grieving process is kind of like ongoing at different levels throughout your healing process. This is what I discovered with the last couple of years. It's that it's not just once, it's a couple of times, but it brings us so much resilience. And I do believe that when we go into this journey of healing and self-awareness and really just going into and being very disciplined at doing the work, we don't regress. I don't believe we do. I think that is something that we incarnate and that we are committed to go full out, and we become very, very curious and interested at just discovering the deepest part of ourselves, even though it is scary, because we know that the other side is so much better than the shit that we've been blinded from, you know, for so long. So it's very all beautiful, even though, you know, and sometimes having a conversation of suicide with someone can take it as, oh, this is really heavy. But I believe that when you're able to go through whatever you went through and all of the, you know, the healing processes that you've had, and just observing everything from a level of, you know, witness consciousness, I always say there is beauty in the ugly. And that the way that life brings us to our knees sometimes is a major gift. You know, it's a major gift because, like you said, like, how much power did you gain from being on that cliff that day and having the ability to choose your own thoughts and having the ability of knowing that that wasn't real, and right there you were freeing yourself, right? And I think that this entire spiritual journey is always about just how can you free more of yourself. It has nothing to do with healing things completely, but it's about being able to see what's real and what's not real, and what's you and what's not you, what's the pattern and what's you, because the pattern in you is different, right? And that is a win. Just being able to see it is a big win. And it doesn't mean that it's never going to come back up, like you said, and bring back those some negative thoughts or disturbing thoughts, but because you've kind of gained this mind agility now, and just observing in everything, you are winning every single time, and you are in your power. So I want people to know that it's not about having it really, really quickly or whatever. It's just about being able to say, oh, wow, this isn't me. And I'm seeing it now. It hurts. And I know it's going to come back up, but it's not me. So I'm free, you know?
Yes. And I think it's about getting comfortable with uncomfortable sensations. You know, I've kind of come from the experience of emotion is energy in motion. And if you can allow the energy to move through the body, it literally is like a 90 seconds if there's no story attached to it. If there's a story attached to it, then it's just going to keep looping and you'll keep processing. But I mean, I have learned through workshops and all of that, that you can just release the energy. You don't have to have a story connected
No,
to it. You can have a rage. I mean, I've done so many rage practices where I literally just like beat the pillow with a bat and have, am supported through that and like yell and scream and put on rage music and just go hardcore with my body, like fully releasing.
Good.
And also, I've had, crying sessions where it's like I'm giving myself full permission to go as deep as I can into this sensation. Exactly. And once I, had the aha of, oh, it's just intense sensations, it passes, it's temporary. That is the key. If you can get out of your mind by dropping into your body and finding a sensation, even right now, just find a sensation in your body, then you're back and connected to your animal, and not trapped in your head. So my thing is to always, when I'm too heady or when, the mind starts to really go, is where's the sensation in my body right now? Like, can I feel my heartbeat? Can I hear the sounds in the room? Take me back to what's actually here in this moment. Because the mind is wild. Yes. If you sit and just watch your mind, like in a meditation, it is wild. Yeah. It's a monkey. It's just like, people are like, oh, I'm trying to not have any thoughts. Meditation's not about having no thoughts, but meditation's about just sitting there in the discomfort of whatever thoughts you're having.
And if you can do it real life in the real moment, where actually you're going to have thoughts that are going to be even triggered by other people, and you can watch them in that moment, right? So
and then everything just slows down and you're like, am I reacting or am I responding? Am I co-creating or am I just letting life have its way with me?
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Yeah. We could go on forever.
I know. It's such I love this so much. I mean, it's such a heavy topic, but it's also just so, I'm so excited because I am on the other side. And I feel like that's why everyone is here, is whatever they've gone through, whatever anyone's gone through is their medicine for someone else.
Yes.
So absolutely. The unique blueprint that we chose is specifically designed for us to turn around and help other people who've gone through something. Yeah.
Speaking of which, I would love for you to just end on telling us a little bit more about that beautiful, film that you're creating, and how can people support you through this? Because we're going to be advertising this as much as we can. I want to know, when is it supposed to come out? Where are you in your process? And people reach you to support you in all of this.
Awesome. We are currently scheduling, depending on my director's schedule, because she's pretty busy. We are scheduling our sizzle reel shoot, which means we have a full concept ready to go, ready to shoot, so that people can see the visual of what the full film would feel like. We have a full script that has been award nominated. And so we are in the fundraising phase for investors and people who just want to help support. However, there's so many ways to support a film, not just by money, but money, donations in the sense of like room and board for actors. There's just so many things, right? And getting talent. So we're currently in the fundraising phase and getting that sizzle reel ready to go. And then once that is all set, then we will be good to shoot. And it's so exciting. It's really going to help a lot of people. It's really going to help so many people. And it's not a biography. It's not, you're not going to go in and see a biopic. You're going to go in and see this really cool cinematic experience, kind of like Inception, has that alternate universe happening, which is the mind. And I'm so proud of it. And the support we've gotten so far has been from people who've really been affected by suicide or addiction in their life, and just small donations here and there. And we've already raised, 25,000. Wow. And we're on our way to more, which is really, really great. And so, you can go to thefilmbloom.com and you'll have all that in your show notes as well, I'm sure.
Yes.
But,
yes.
So,
so people can go and actually support you on that website. They can go and make a donation if they want to.
Yes, and there's two ways to do a donation. We do have a GoFundMe, but we
Okay.
also have we've partnered up with the New Mexico Film Funding, so we have a 501c3, which means you can get a tax write-off if you're in the States.
Okay. Perfect. That's amazing. Thank you for that information because I
Yeah.
will make sure that people know about this so they can go and support you because we need to
Yay.
make this video viral. This is what I want. I want to help as many people as we can on this day of suicide prevention and the entire month as well. So let's do it. Let's push it. And I just want to say thank you so much for this, for your time. Thank you. And I will be probably, collaborating a little bit more with you. We'll be probably putting that film or whatever updates that you have on my website as well, so that people can continue to follow there too. And
Awesome.
yeah, I'm super happy that this worked out. That the technology finally got us to finish.
Yeah. Minus all the obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
So, all right, thank you, and I wish you all the best, my dear, and
Thank
can't wait
you.
to see this movie come out. It's gonna happen.
Yay.
Bye. Thank you.